let's unpack some coronavirus restrictions in Canada, looking from the vantage point of proportionality and enforcement. What do I mean? Well, let's unpack two very different examples. So here's a rule that's in place in many jurisdictions in Canada that I imagine the overwhelming vast majority of people support practically 100%, which is in many long-term care facilities in Canada, if you would like to visit a loved one, you first must get a coronavirus test to prove that you are negative. Okay, let's unpack that for a minute. We know that the majority of coronavirus deaths in Canada have been in people over 80 in long-term care facilities. They are the high-risk people here. They are the individuals dying. And then when it comes to getting a test, well, it's really no sweat off your back. It's a mild inconvenience. The lines are pretty much under control now. What does it really take? 30 minutes, door to door. You're not going to lose your job going to get a coronavirus test. So I hope we can all agree that passes the smell test. Although I have heard, here's an interesting note, that actually not all the places are asking for proof that you got the test and were negative. I mean, you go, you get the test, you get the report back, but then some people just show up and they say, all right, I tested negative, and they let you in. You don't have to show it. So, okay, enforcement actually kind of lacks on what I would say is almost the most important coronavirus restriction in the entire country. All right, let's take a look at another rule now, because there are a bunch of restrictions that are flip-flopping a lot, going on and off, places opening and closing, like gyms, for instance. And the fact that you can even turn them on, turn them off, open them, close them, limit the size, tells you that it's not like the authorities have determined those are the places where definitely people are getting, the deadly spread. They cannot ever under any circumstances open. It shows that they're just not sure. They're kind of closing them out of an abundance of caution. Restaurants, similar situation. The data suggests, well, not that many cases of spread in restaurants, and even the cases that they do cite. Medical officers have clarified that those cases also involve the staff who are hanging out together in close quarters before it opens or after the restaurant has closed. They're sitting in the chairs in the back room together having a staff meal, an experience that's more like an intimate gathering among friends. It's not really something specific to the restaurant gathering. One thing that should always be repeated, the COVID Alert app, that federal app, it is only triggered by people being within 6 feet of each other for 15 minutes or more, telling you that sort of these fleeting passing by interactions with strangers are not things that people generally have to be concerned about. But more on restaurants then. So it's generally, I think, divided in a lot of people's opinions as to whether or not the restaurants should be closed, whether they should be open, whether indoor dining without masks is a risky experience. And even if the restaurants were open, there would be many people in Canada who opted not to go for them. But restaurants are saying, let us open, let us just prove that we can do this responsibly, safely. And in many jurisdictions, particularly in Toronto, the authorities have said absolutely no. Well, I'm sure you know that the owner of one barbecue shop in the West End of Toronto said, well, screw it, I don't accept your reasoning, and I'm doing it anyway. Now, just to repeat, the authorities are not actually saying the problem with indoor dining is you may specifically go and get it and seriously and you're going to die, but more they say, well, if people get it in restaurants, which is a maybe, those people maybe will spread it to other people who will maybe get it seriously and then maybe be in hospitalizations. So this is a few parts removed. It's very different than the long-term care scenario restriction that we just discussed. So what do they do when this guy decides, you know what, I'm opening my barbecue restaurant anyway? Well, they could have just said, look, buddy, please don't do this, and there's a rule against it, so here's your $120 fine or $300 fine or whatever. No, what actually happened is they brought in the cavalry, almost literally. They brought in horses to break up the crowd. There were at some point about 50 officers there until the owner, as I'm sure many people saw in video, was led away in handcuffs. So let's step back for a moment, look at these two rules, and as I said, the one about getting the test before you go in the long-term care facility isn't even necessarily enforced. And you start to wonder, do we have some of these things just a little bit, dare I humbly suggest, just a little bit out of proportion?